Atlantis is real. Hi everybody, welcome back. You are watching Philosophy with Kerry. Today we are going to talk about one of my favourite things in the world, our favourite subjects. So we are going to talk about Atlantis, but I will tell you the true story of Atlantis. Now, I'm not just saying this because I think my story is true compared to everybody else's. I am saying this because this is my actual studies of Plato's Timaeus and Critias. Now, I have read and studied these documents from Plato himself. Plato, the Greek philosopher, for those who do not know him or know about him. I was actually surprised to know that people don't really know about Plato. He is a very important person in our history. He gave us most of the theories that we have today, and yes, his knowledge was just limitless. But we definitely underestimate him. So here I have done my own documents to share with you guys. I can guarantee to you that nothing I say in this video will not be something that you can relate to the dialogues or read yourself in the dialogues. Generally, they're just in my words, but definitely not manipulated in any way. Also, some of this is other people's words. But anyway, let's get into it. Atlantis, known as the light of the sun in ancient Egypt. In Timaeus, we are given the basis of the information of Atlantis as told by Critias. Critias gained this information from Solon, who was a trusted friend of his grandfather, Treetops. Solon was the wisest of the 7 sages in our ancient history, which were 7 men who were very well known for their thoughts and theories and shaped the law, basically. Solon was entrusted this information from a great Egyptian priest and shown evidence in the great Egyptian temples during his travels. Solon states that he was in the process of completing a historical document of Atlantis upon his return, but he was distracted by immediate issues in his homeland, and so his document was left unfinished. Although his fellow men stated that if he had have published this document, he would have been as great as Homer. Solon was told of Atlantis and of an old world that has been populated and destructed many times by many different causes, meaning there has been many apocalyptic events, and humanity has had to start again a number of times. Although most of humanity have forgotten about this, Critias goes on to say that although this story is very strange, it is very, very true. They stress how true it is over and over again throughout these dialogues. And knowing the information that we have been given, really it's quite absurd to say that this is a fairy tale. The more you research, the more you learn. And this is incredible. So they say that this story was so true that they would share it to Athens, the public of Athens, on the day of their goddess, in a thanks to her, in praise to her. They would share this knowledge with Athens as they believed that they had right to it, being relatives to the people of Egypt and of ancient Atlantis. To give example of a perfect nation that's got corrupt with greed and so failed, how greed shifted their fortune. All of the men involved in the lecture were respected men, although some of them were great poets as well. None of them were tale tellers, and none of their poems resonated with this story itself. It is way too detailed. The only thing keeping Atlantis a myth is its location. Plato gives us an exact account of Atlantis from birth to destruction, as well as an apocalyptic history where the world has been repopulated many times before, and how the Egyptians were the only keepers of this memory, from knowledge held in their temples and the protection of their beloved River Nile. That when great floods happened, the River Nile would protect them, and in other circumstances, their temples would protect them, and their knowledge. The priest says, "And I tell you, there have been and will be again many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes, the greatest brought by fire and water, and other lesser ones in innumerable other causes." And he also states, "O Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children, and there is not an old man among you." And when asked to explain, he says, "I mean to say that in mind you are all young. There is no ancient opinion handed to you, nor any science that is hoary with age." Solon had only travelled to Egypt to study antiquity and learn things about their culture, but he left with much more after he met the Egyptian priests in the Egyptian Delta, where the River Nile divides. Timaeus and Critias shares with us an extraordinary wealth of information, although the end of Critias was mysteriously lost. As soon as the gods of Olympus sit down to discuss what will be the fate of Atlantis, mysteriously the rest is lost. Although this may just be because Solon never finished the record. Maybe this is as far as he got. Or maybe the rest is hidden because they do not want us to know what the gods spoke about. It states that Zeus was mad at the Atlanteans for their greed, and so he called all of the gods to Mount Olympus, which by the way is a real place. It's an actual mountain with a lot of great architectural history around it. So they all gather to meet in Mount Olympus, and Zeus says that he is angry with the Atlanteans for how they have lost their touch with the divine and became mortal. So they gather to discuss punishment, and then the dialogue is lost. Also, it's very important to mention that the people of our past really believed in the gods and goddesses. So much so they believed that they were special people or people in hierarchy having a normal mortal basically life, or partially mortal life. So they may have just been ancient rulers. In my opinion, they were definitely real in some kind of way, shape or form, whatever way. The priest says to Solon that they share the same goddess and are related, and that the goddess created Athens 1,000 years prior to creating Egypt, and that before the Great Destruction, Athens was a very godlike city also, the most noble under the face of heaven. He says that Atlantis was a great empire of our history, in control of their nation and several others. Atlantis had 10 kings that ruled from the Pillars to Egypt and Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, ancient Tuscany, Rome, He says they endured many great wars but conquered them all. A great war took place before the end of time, their time, this great apocalypse, and it took place with the people inside the pillars with those who were beyond. I do think that this basically hints to saying that Atlantis was within the pillars, along with Greece and its other fellow neighbours in this war, meaning it's probably located within the pillars. He states to Solon that 9,000 years had passed since this great war, giving us a kind of time frame of Atlantis, which I will tell you more about in a minute. Atlantis worshipped Poseidon and he was said to be their creator. This story goes, Poseidon fell in love with a mortal girl from the mountains who lived with her mother and father, Evenor and Lucep. Cleito and her family lived among the mountain people, who at the time were not greatly civilized. Upon the death of Cleito's parents, Poseidon introduced himself to her, and the love was mutual, and he dwelt in the mountains with her. Upon the creation of the sons, the 10 great sons who were 5 sets of twins, with Atlas, the eldest, being most rewarded, with even the Atlantic Ocean named after him. Atlas also owned the mountain of his birth and the surrounding area within. His twin, Gaidyrus, ruled from the pillars to the city, and the other sons, who each ruled their own portion of the land. Amphiras, Aemon, Minusus, and Artathon, Leucippus, Mestor and Aziz, and finally Dipripes. Don't know if I said all them right, by the way. Nobody knows. Each brother ruled their portion of the land. Cleito and Poseidon make love on a great mountain near the mountains where Cleito dwelled. The mountain was said to be not too high, not too low. This was said to break the land. I'm not sure how nice that sounds. I'm not sure how nice of an experience that sounds for poor little mortal Cleito. But anyway, I'm sure he looked after her. But so, this was in a large plain with a mountain in the centre, with surrounding mountains. This exact spot was where they were said to first meet. This erotic event shook and broke the earth, dividing it into rings in the formation of Atlantis. Rings that surrounded this mountain, not too big, not too small, that were filled with springs, some hot, some cold. These springs came down from the mountains and flowed through and then out towards the Mediterranean or the ocean. And yeah, there were 2 rings of land, 3 of water, and this acted as a barrier to protect Atlantis, because upon this time, when they first met and the creation of Atlantis, there was said to be no ships. The center island held 2 springs from the earth, one hot, one cold. Also, a wealth of fruitation evolved in the center island, with fruit trees and many plants and fragrances from the plants. A number of animals arose also, many elephants and bulls. In the center of the land, it was the highest of all portions, and in all senses. There was 2 mighty temples, one dedicated to Poseidon, Inside this temple there was a great statue dedicated to him, of him riding a chariot with 6 winged horses, and the 100 famous Nereids riding dolphins, which were sea nymphs of that time. The statue was so big that his head touched the roof. The roof of the temple was ivory, although the walls and floors of the temple were filled with silver, gold and orichalcum. This is an ancient type of Atlantean gold, which we no longer have access to, although it has been appearing in certain parts of the world, which could be another sign that Atlantis is real. So Atlantis was filled with this, as it was only found in their ancient land, and it was second best to gold. Poseidon's temple was a stadia in length and half a stadia in width. All of Poseidon's outer temple was silver, although the pinnacles outside the entrance were gold. There was also a large altar for rituals in Poseidon's temple. Plato's temple was also very beautiful and magnificent in beauty and size. Outside the temple there were 10 statues of the 10 kings and their wives, in dedication to the great city and where it came from. There was also a great wealth of trees due to the excellence of the soil. In the next ring of land they had public cisterns, which are community baths like you would see in Roman era. Some would be roofed and some would be open. And there would be different cisterns for animals, different sexes and hierarchy. In both of the outer rings there was a wealth of gardens and statues dedicated to the gods and goddesses, and a horse ring for horses stretched around the whole outer portion. The city was enclosed with a great wall that met at the mouth of the channel from the city to the sea. Here was a great canal from the city gates to the sea that would allow ships into the outermost region, and they created smaller passages for ships to enter the inner zones. The canal was 300 feet in width, 50 stadia in length, and 100 feet deep. The outer wall of the city was coated in brass, the next wall of tin, and the wall of the city their famous orichalcum, Atlantean gold. The Atlanteans bridged over the streams of their land to make passage. Atlantis also had constructed roads, temples, palaces, harbours and docks. The outer lands were always densely crowded, and once established, the mountains around the city were said to behold wealthy country folk. The mountains were said to be greater than any that still exist, meaning they don't exist anymore. The mountain people also followed Atlantean rule and were divided into different districts of Atlantis. In the city, each lot of the plain needed a military leader. This was divided between the districts and villages. Each leader would have a chariot, which they had an excessive amount of all different kinds of. 10,000 chariots were owned for use in war alone. Atlantis was said to be populated with 20,000 people constantly, meaning half of their population were involved in war probably. In the city centre there was said to be a great pillar of orichalcum, the Atlantean gold, which states on it the Atlantean law, which is said to be handed down by Poseidon himself to the people, or at least to the kings. Sacred gatherings took place in the city centre between the kings at the temple of Poseidon every 5th or 6th year. The kings would meet and fill the land of the innermost centre with bulls and pray at the altar of Poseidon, and then using only staffs, which they called staves, they would hunt the bulls. They would find the bull that they believed to be the chosen one, take it to the pillar, and they would bleed the bull by cutting its throat onto the pillar, and then drink wine from the bull's blood clots, and then burn the body. This was their sacred pledge to each other, and to disobey was said to bring curses to their family and land. And then they would all go home with a golden tablet, and they would write on the golden tablet any issues they had amongst each other, to meet back at the temple the next day and share these among each other. So any disputes, this is how they kept peace. I think this is so funny. Can you imagine rocking up with a golden tablet, like in your fancy robe, sat there like, last night I wrote that Atlas should be kicked out of the Brotherhood. Yeah, so I think Atlas should go. For many generations, Atlanteans were said to be the most beautiful people. Divine-natured, honest, selfless, perfect beings. But over time, they lost this divine nature and rebelled, becoming more mortal and more obsessed with material possessions. The rest of the dialogue ends with this, and the rest has been lost. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law and is able to see into such things, perceiving that an honourable race is in a woeful plight and wanting to inflict punishment upon them, that they might be chastened and improve. Hold up. So he wanted them to improve, not die. Anyway, continuing. Collected all of the gods into their most holy habitation, which being placed in the centre of the world, hold on again, in the centre of the world, if it is circular and ever-flowing, there's said to be no centre. Does this resonate with flat earthers? I don't know. Not that I'm a believer, but just saying. Continued. Behold all created things, and when he collected them together, he spoke as follows. Will never not end. It finished there. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the apocalypse.
Legend says 12,000 years ago, it disappeared suddenly in a single day and night.
A single night of excessive rain washed away the earth and laid bare the rock, and at the same time there was earthquakes, and then occurred an extraordinary inundation, meaning flood, which was third before the great destruction of Deucalion, a great hero which survived the great flood brought by Zeus, hidden with his family in a chest created. This is like the story of the great Noah. The great floods and earthquakes that submerged Atlantis also affected the whole of Europe, Asia, and put an end to the people of Greece also. It took Athens 2,800 years to repopulate and recover. The date. So Plato says it's 300 years before his time. Plato was born in 428 BC. Solon was told that this event happened around 9,000 years prior to him. Calculated, this gives us the date of 9,780 BC, or around then. So 11,800 years ago. Interesting to note that Mesopotamians were populating the Mediterranean areas around then. They have been documented back as early as 14,000 BC. And we know that their lands flourished around 10,000 BC with advanced civilizations, perfectly civilized with farming, trading, agriculture, irrigation, knowledge of the earth and sky, and much more. Where the Acropolis now is, there was a fountain which was choked by the earthquake, and now there is only a few small streams. The geography of Atlantis. Location. In front of the straits which your people call the Pillars of Hercules. In this time, the pillars faced Gates, Spain. A passage to other islands from which you may pass the whole of the opposite continent of the true ocean. They believed that the ocean within the Mediterranean was only a harbour, as it had a narrow entrance. It looked towards the south but was sheltered from the north, ruled from the Pillars to Egypt and Europe to Tyrrhenia, ancient Tuscany, Rome. It was in the centre of the island whole, but facing the sea. The land around the city was a type of oblong shape, enclosed with mountains that travelled towards the ocean. The size? Bigger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined. In one direction, the outer land was 3,000 stadia. Across the centre inland was 2,000 stadia. 3,000 stadia is said to be around 600 kilometres, and 2,000 stadia is said to be around 400 kilometres. One stadia is anywhere from 157 to 209 metres, and it's measured in a Greek unit of length. He mentions that Atlantis back then was accessible to ships, meaning that for a long time it wasn't, and they do note that the Mediterranean was full with mud. Plato was a Greek philosopher born around 428 BC. He came from noble Athenian lineage. His mother and father were named Ariston and Procyon. He was raised in the war of 431 to 404 BC. Famous for his views on ethics and introduction to the theory of forms, which states that the physical world is only a shadow of the true one. He spent 12 years studying in southern Italy and Sicily, studying mystical mathematics and philosophy. He definitely didn't document fairy tales. He was said to resemble the Jewish god. He opened the first open-air academy, the Platonic Academy of Athens, a school of philosophy. Sounds amazing. Plato didn't believe in possession and never married and didn't feel the need. He gifted us with 36 dialogues documenting the ancient past. He had 3 brothers and 1 sister. He had a beloved mentor named Socrates, who we also very much highly worship. Here's an ancient quote from Socrates, his mentor. Here is a miracle. The one is many and infinite, but the many are only one. Plato's dialogues tell us a lot about the ancient world, a lot of which we know he couldn't have made up because he had no access to this information in his time. He knew things that he couldn't. And so he must have found this information from somewhere, or some source. So why do we not believe that he did have tales from an Egyptian priest, and that this is all true? Because it probably is. I believe it is, and if you got me a submarine, I bet you I could find it. He notes that the Greek Acropolis once extended to the Eridanus and Ilissus, both of which are ancient Greek rivers, near the Acropolis, and also had a Pnyx on one side, which is a hill in central Athens used for a symbolism of sorts, and the Lysabetus opposite the Pnyx, which is a limestone hill. So he gives us all these elements that we can work with to actually figure out if it's true. Critus shares Solon's original document, passed down from his grandfather, who was a trusted friend of Solon, and he states to the whole of Athens that he has this document. Solon was a famous legislator and shaped the Athenian law. Let's talk about some facts. 3 stones were quarried from the land: white, black and red, and they used these to build most houses. Timaeus was an astronomer. Also interesting to note that seeing as though gods mainly produce twins, in the Mediterranean there is a high rise in twins. When Solon visited Egypt, it would have looked a lot different than today. 10,000 years ago, the Earth's gravity tilted the entire planet around 0.5 degrees, making global climate changes. Before this, most of Egyptian land was grassland and savanna, filled with tropical features and creatures. I would also like to mention Edgar Cayce and Bimini Road, which is said to be the first findings of Atlantis. Edgar Cayce, as I've mentioned before, is a very respected man, which has documented many prophecies that have come true. And then the rich art structure, the Eye of Africa. Although this site fits Atlantis in so many ways, the size is just a bit off in the outer rings. Plus there is no evidence of buildings, so we're not sure. Until evidence is found, we still don't know if that was where Atlantis was. There have been many constructed lands in the ocean, especially in the areas that were said to be ruled by the Atlantean kings, and these areas and hidden cities are often beautiful and very much resemble Atlantis and ancient Egypt and all of those great ancient cultures. No other cultures on record entirely fit this, but there has been a new finding in Dunana, Spain. There's a temple showing a culture with fine metal like Atlantis and strange symbology alike also. And so I'll leave it there, guys. This has been a huge video probably, but I had so much to put into it and I really didn't want to leave any huge dot points out. So Atlantis is definitely bloody real. After reading the documents, I can 100% vouch that I believe it is real, and this has also convinced me more so that the gods were real people and the goddesses were real people as well. I'm not saying that they had these supernatural amazing powers. All I'm saying is that they were hierarchy, and well, I believe in magic anyway, so you know, probs were. But anyway, I definitely believe they were people. So thank you guys so much for watching anyway, anyone who has discovered this video. So if enough people keep documenting about Atlantis and actually studying real historical documents, I'm sure that it will eventually be found. And I really hope that happens, because it will open us up to a whole new revenue of beliefs. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in my next videos.